Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is TIA, Unpacks Freight, Tariffs, Trusts, and the Fight Against Fraud with my friend Chris Burroughs. How's it going, Chris?
Good, Joe. Appreciate you having me on the podcast.
I'm excited to talk to you. We've been exchanging emails for a minute. So, Chris, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Yeah. So, as Joe said, Chris Burroughs, President and CEO of the Transportation Intermediaries Association. We're based here in our headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia, which they like to call in the DC metro area kind of association headquarters. So a lot of the associations are here headquartered in Alexandria. But TIA represents about 1,900 logistics providers, freight brokers in the transportation supply chain, ranging a variety of size of our member companies, from multi-billion-dollar corporations to a majority of our members, small businesses, 5 million or less in terms of annual revenue. The freight brokers, obviously, we like to call ourselves the center of the supply chain and the connective tissue between shippers and carriers. So that's like any trade association, we do a lot of different things, from education to advocacy to putting on some great meetings throughout the year and providing value for our members in the industry.
Yep. I always think I couldn't work at TIA because I can't say Transportation Intermediaries Association properly on a regular basis.
we try to go, I have a congressional affairs background, so I do a lot of meetings on Capitol Hill. We try to go with TIA, but there's literally like 6 other. There's toy, tire, tortilla, telecommunications. There's a bunch of TIAs. So we often get confused with TIA-CREF, the financial institution. So yeah, the elevator pitch with a member of Congress when you're trying to get out, Transportation Intermediaries Association, takes up about half the ride. So you got to be quick. So I talk fast. I apologize about that, but this is how I'm trained to be.
Yeah. So you have members who are, they could be freight brokers. I know that's a big chunk of them, but there's also a lot of the companies that sell the technology to the freight brokers. So I've been to a number of TIA events, always top notch. And it is kind of a little bit like of a reunion when you go to the TIA. You see all the people you saw at the last conference. It's always top notch. And you guys just had a conference. When was your last conference? A few weeks ago, right?
Yeah, it was a few weeks ago in April out in beautiful San Antonio, Texas.
I'm sorry I missed that. I can't get to all these conferences, but again, TIA always does a good job. So what problem do you solve for your customers or your members?
Yeah, like I said, we solve a variety of problems or issues, if you will, from our members' perspective, from being their advocate on Capitol Hill, working with members of Congress, lawmakers, working with the federal agencies, working with the administration to address issues and concerns that are impacting our members and the industry. We provide education. We have a variety of member benefit courses. We have a few other certifications within our educational portfolio to really educate and grow our members to be better stewards of the industry. Additionally, like you talked about the annual conference, we hold 3 big conferences throughout the year. Again, it's networking, it's building not only business relationships, but those personal relationships as well. So if something were to come up, you've got that friend you can call and say, hey, we're dealing with X, Y, and Z. Has this impacted your business? Just having that professional database of relationships is obviously massive. And TIA likes to be the conduit to build that relationship amongst our members.
Yep. You mentioned advocacy for our industry, and we got a few topics, 4 topics we want to talk about today. And a couple of them are that advocacy in action. And it kind of sounds like I can just imagine people listening going, I don't need TIA to advocate for me, but we do. We do need, we're going to talk about fraud, of course. And there's also some stuff going on with the transparency in the pricing. All of these things, we need somebody in Washington, D.C., not just anybody. And by the way, technically, we can all call our congressman or our senator and say, you know what I would like to see in the freight brokerage space or in the freight forwarding space or the technology space? It's not the same as an organization like TIA saying, hey, we have the ear of Washington. And again, that's not an easy thing to get because they're busy doing something or other. so anyway, Chris, tell us a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined the mothership that is TIA.
Yeah, I grew up in the Washington D.C. area, so I'm local to D.C. Which surprisingly, there's not a lot of people that actually hang around here. There's obviously a lot of transient people coming into our nation's capital for career opportunities, but a few of us hung around. So I was born and raised in Virginia. Went to a small Division II school, Shepherd University in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. We like to call it the Harvard on the Potomac. Um, Studied political science, history there, played a little golf. It was a great opportunity. And then began my professional career working for the U.S. House of Representatives, working for the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Go figure. So I did that for a number of years. Then went over to a small boutique lobbying firm where TIA was actually one of our clients. So I spent a couple of years representing TIA on some of the political issues and legislative issues from the lobbying firm side of things. Got to know our previous CEO, two CEOs of Bob Voltman extremely well. And about 15 years ago this July, Bob offered me a job and said, "Hey, why don't you come in house and do this for us in terms of government relations?" And the rest is history. So I've been here 15 years and assumed the role of president and CEO last end of November 2024. And really been excited. I know Ann Rinke was on your show recently. Ann was amazing to work for the last 4 years, and wish her all the best and appreciate everything that she did for this organization.
Yeah, I think it was for her, it was going home. She said going back to um, she's at the Intermodal Association of North America. And I think she came from the rail business originally. And by the way, your qualifications are perfect for what we're doing. And again, I think so often when we think of Washington, you go lobbyists. It sounds almost like we've heard so many negative stories about lobbyists, but the reality is we do need somebody to represent us in Washington, D.C. And I think for the most part, lobbyists are just advocating, hey, these are the problems that we're facing. I think what we often hear, though, is, hey, that lobbyist is trying to protect the big guys from the competition, or we're trying to get a set aside for our industry, and all of it sounds kind of negative. But we've got challenges right now. The industry's struggling, and you guys are going to bat for us in DC, so much needed.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Joe. So like my wife's a teacher, kindergarten teacher. So people would ask, she'd be like, "Hey, what does your husband do for work?" And she'd be like, "Oh, he's a lobbyist." And I'd be like, "Oh, don't tell people that. Like, the bad L word." And they would typically make faces or like, "Oh, okay." But government relations, lobbyists are extremely important. And it's a valuable service. Oftentimes does get kind of roped in with the big lobbyists as you think of. I think there's a great movie called what's the Aaron Eckhart movie? Thank You for Smoking.
Okay.
Yeah, they have the mod squad there, so it's like alcohol, tobacco. What's the other one? Guns. Point being is like that's probably the bad part of lobbying, but from a trade association, especially on something transportation related, that's an extremely valuable service.
Yeah, I always think that it starts off where it's like, hey, there's a whole bunch of us insurance companies. We all have the same problem. Could you go help us? Please explain our problem to Washington. And the friendly lobbyist is like, I'll do that. And then the next year he says, I'm going to raise my price a little bit. And they're like, well, you have to get us a little more. And then a new lobbyist pops up and says, I'm not going to save you money. I'm going to get guaranteed profits for your industry. And you're going to pay me twice as much as that old lab. So I always feel like our capitalist country, sometimes it drags us in the wrong direction. And meanwhile, you hear, oh, every single member of Congress works with that lobby. And you're like, oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I got 4 topics I want to talk to you about today. And the first one, of course, is the state of freight. And I'll set this up and then I want to get your 2 cents on it. It seems like we had such a boom time during COVID, and then um, ever since COVID, it's been a little slow. And I talk to a lot of technology companies, and they're feeling it too because they're selling to freight brokers or warehousing companies or freight forwarders, and all those guys have been buying technology. They bought a lot during COVID. They saw the need for it, but now it feels like the margins are compressed and the growth just isn't there. And everyone keeps saying next quarter, in 6 months. I stopped even asking people, when will it come back? And I think it's bottomed out, but it just doesn't seem to be surging. So anyway, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, we're all familiar with what happened kind of post. We're all familiar with what happened with the beginning of the pandemic, what that did to the supply chain, really kind of shutting a lot of things down and really hurting the industry. And then we're all familiar with the massive boom that happened kind of tail end of, I don't want to say post COVID, but it was kind of the tail end of COVID plus post COVID, just the massive growth in the industry. From a logistics side, plus from a trucking side. I mean, you saw a lot of trucking companies enter the marketplace. You saw a lot of logistics companies enter the marketplace. And it was a massive booming industry, and an issue we're going to talk about in a little bit, I'm sure, is freight fraud. We saw a massive influx of freight fraud because of this. But with the current marketplace, I think as that has kind of tailed off, the volumes have certainly calmed down from the massive post-COVID buying, if you will. We're in this lull, like you mentioned, and we talked about conferences. I go to a lot of these conferences, and you're right. The economist that gets up there is like, "Hey, next quarter is going to be great," but we keep going every quarter after quarter after quarter. And I think there's probably some light at the end of the tunnel eventually. The last I heard was the end of this year. Hopefully, we're going to see kind of a shift. But I think a lot of it's baked into the economy. I don't pretend to be an economist, but it is a lot of uncertainty. We hear from our members. We don't take a political stance on the tariffs that are coming out from the Trump administration, but we hear a lot from our members in terms of the tariffs and the impact that they're having on the supply chain. And if you're in a niche industry, talking with a member who does oversized, overdimensional loads, who's ordering, a lot of their clients are some of these big manufacturers like Caterpillar or John Deere. That industry is probably put a lot of product into place before the tariffs went into place. I know a lot of them are on kind of a hold now, and there's just not the volume there anymore, or it's kind of a cease of operations to see what happens. So as we're all feeling it, looking at our stock market, looking at our 401ks, uncertainty isn't necessarily good for the stock market. The same as with the freight industry as well. You're going to see a lot of ebb and flow in terms of market volatility. And that's really a lot of that's baked on uncertainty and what's going on with the overall economy. I think, like I said, I think we're going to get to a better place potentially by the end of the year, hopefully. But again, some of this uncertainty's got to get cleared up.
Yeah, the tariffs. I think this is, again, I don't know. I think it's probably a good thing in the longer run. Let's get the right tariffs. I do believe we're repositioning supply chains. The tariffs against Canada or Mexico, those don't really concern me. We're going to have North America is going to be a great, those are our best trading partners. But I do believe we're going to move supply chains back from China. And that is a big interruption. By the way, I can say this because I'm getting old now. Early in my career, I moved supply chains to China. And it takes a lot longer to go do reposition supply chains than we let on here. So I do believe it's not just, I got a spare warehouse, I'm going to open a factory. You have to have the workforce, you have to have the infrastructure. There's a ton of stuff that's required beyond the factory. And, we're going to have to redevelop some of that thing. But I do believe we're going to see certain industries move back, like energy infrastructure stuff is going to move back here. Shipbuilding, some of it's going to move back here. Electronics, anything to do with pharma, I think is going to move back here. So it's going to take some time. I think this is a good thing. Local supply chains tend to be better than global supply chains in terms of sustainability and resilience. So
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. The sourcing strategies on a global market are going to take time. It's not you're not going to flip a light switch on and everything just changes. I was talking with somebody in the administration the other day, and they were just like, um, not to be political, but they were President Trump's not thinking about this year. He's thinking about 20 years down the line.
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, well, our members are thinking about right now, and
I
can
think
you
we
keep the
all
lights
want a
on?
better we all want a better country and a better world, but we also want to get paid this week and next week.
Exactly. We want the business to be there in 20 years, which I guess is what he's thinking for. But for our members, that's what's happening right now.
Yes, exactly. So we had again, COVID was a boom. It was a horrible time for for a lot of reasons, but we survived this pandemic. This is the first pandemic in history where people gained weight. Um, and so we survived it, but there was people who sat out, which caused rates to go higher. We also were all sitting at home buying on Amazon because we couldn't go to restaurants, we couldn't go on vacation, can't buy a car. So we're buying all sorts of electronics and other stuff. The industry boomed. I think we had a whole bunch of trucking companies and freight brokerages open up. Our friend Kevin Hill told me, I think it was 31,000 freight brokerages was the peak. Now I think we're about 25,000. And that probably reflects also a similar amount in the trucking business. We had a whole bunch of people add trucks. We had new companies pop up, and those armies had to leave the field. So it's been a long, difficult. And by the way, a lot of people and companies also got lots of checks from the government, which tended to mean I can hang out for a little longer. If I got some fat paychecks during COVID, and then I got a few extra checks from the government, made it easier to stay in business when it got slow. Anyway, it's been a crazy time. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is transparency. So you said you guys are working on some transparency with the legislature. Please talk about that.
Yeah. So one thing that popped up during the pandemic was this call for further broker transparency. There was a lot of trucks that were, there's quite a lot of national media attention. There was a lot of trucks that were parked up and down the National Mall here in Washington, D.C., protesting a variety of things. But one of the main things they were protesting was what they were calling was calls for further broker transparency. So a couple organizations filed what's called a petition for rulemaking with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, where they're asking the FMCSA to step in and promulgate rulemaking regulations on a particular issue or topic. And the topic they highlighted was broker transparency. And basically, what they want to see is an enhancement of a 1980s part of the Code of Federal Regulations. It's called 371.3. That talks about the sharing of financial information between all parties of a transaction. Now, in 1980, when this was promulgated out to the public through the Federal Register by the Interstate Commerce Commission, which no longer ceases to exist, a lot of their authority was obviously given over to FMCSA. Brokers at that time were a commissioned sales agent of a trucking company. So they would go out and source loads, and then the trucking company themselves would pay them a small commission for finding loads for them. Obviously, coming off of trucking deregulation, this is not the way the marketplace currently works. As we're all aware, there are separate business transactions between the shipper and the broker and then the carrier. But nevertheless, this petition rulemaking has been granted. It came out the first day I took over as president and CEO of TIA. So that was a nice gift from the previous administration. And it basically calls for the sharing of proprietary information, margin information 48 hours after delivery. Folks would also like to see the federal government step in with private contract negotiations and be specific about what can be included in a contract and what can't be included in a contract. We think that's problematic. And for us, it's an outdated regulation. It currently no longer applies to the way the market operates. And we kind of the analogy that we give when we're talking to lawmakers and other folks about this is if I hire a general contractor to come in and finish my basement, for instance, that we agree to a price and move forward. That general contractor doesn't disclose to me how much he pays the electrician, how much he pays the plumber, how much he pays the drywall guy. That's the sort of
Right. That's his business.
Yeah, that's his business.
I don't go to a restaurant and do the same and go, wow, $80 for steak, potato, a glass of wine. So I've got to know what you pay for that steak, and also how much you paying your guys, and what's your rent here.
Yeah, yeah. So we think, and we don't include it in our contract, our model contract we give to members, but there are members out there that have to include certain language to that has been passed down from their shippers, because shippers obviously don't want their proprietary information getting out there, what they're paying, what their volumes are, what their lanes are. That's a huge competitive advantage that they have, and their competition would love to have that, and rightfully so. It needs to be kept secret. So we oftentimes have to pass, our members oftentimes have to pass that down to the carrier to say, hey, we can't disclose this information under this regulation because of this. So, and these groups that are calling for this would like the federal government to step into this. We don't believe that it's the federal government's role to step into private contract negotiations. I think we can probably, most of us can all agree that that's probably something we don't want Uncle Sam doing, is peeling back contracts and looking through them.
Chris, before we hit the record button, we were talking about stockbrokers versus how freight brokers work. And stockbrokers for a long time kind of had different approach to doing business. They would get paid by the transaction. Sometimes they would churn accounts, and they were kind of, their interests weren't necessarily our interests. Freight brokers, for the most part, aren't doing that. But there's sometimes a sense that the carrier is getting ripped off, and that's why we want this transparency. But I think the industry is kind of moving to a more transparent model anyway. We don't necessarily need the government's help in doing that. There's a lot of big logistics companies that say, we are doing managed freight. I'm working with Chris. He's got $10 million and we're charging him this much money for the management, and we're giving him, here's what the carrier paid. Here's what we paid for every one of these transactions. Here's the fees you paid to us. We can be as transparent as we want in our supply chains. We don't need the government telling us you have to do it. That's not particularly useful. And it feels to me like we're just adding an extra layer of bureaucracy that's maybe not necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of regulations that have come out over the years. I think the one that's just kind of popping in my brain is dealing with the 34-hour restart provision for trucking companies, where the federal government was basically telling truck drivers, hey, this is when you should rest. This is when you should restart.
That doesn't even work.
We look at the kind of the same way. To your point, Joe, is that if people want to be, if brokers want to be completely transparent, open the books, have at it. I mean, obviously that's your business, that's your prerogative. But our point is, we don't want the federal government stepping in, private contract negotiations, stepping in and mandating this transparency dated on a piece of regulation that's quite frankly outdated, unnecessary, and burdensome from in certain instances when the shipper is required to pass down confidentiality agreements, and therefore our members are required to pass those forward to trucking companies.
Yep, you had an analogy about somebody refinishing your basement. Please tell us that one.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of equated to that when looking at this issue is, when let's say I'm going to refinish my basement. I'm going to work with a general contractor we're going to agree to a price, and he's going to come in and he's going to do the work. He doesn't disclose to me, he or she doesn't disclose to me on what he paid or she paid the plumber or the electrician or the drywall specialist. That's his prerogative, that's his business, and that's the margins that he's got to operate within his business. At the time in 1980, when this regulation was put out that the folks point towards, brokers were a commission sales agent. And the Interstate Commerce Commission was concerned, what they called illegal freight rebating. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but essentially they were concerned that shippers and brokers would be the same owner and kind of, pushing loads, obviously, to themselves and then get paid a commission on that. So there was talk of sharing financial information. Everyone was part of the same transaction, similar to like a real estate agent. Brokers don't operate that way anymore. It's done on two separate business transactions, one with shippers, one with trucking companies.
Yeah, and by the way, the general contractor story you tell, I totally agree with you. But if I wanted to, I could say the guy refinishing my basement, hey, I want to work with somebody who gives me, I want a detailed, you tell me what you paid for materials. I want to know what you're paying to the electrical contractor, the plumbing. I could ask that, and he has a choice. I want to work with you, or I don't want to work with you. He might go, you know what? I don't want to work with somebody who's going to be such a micromanager. I've been doing this for 20 years. Uh, there's lots of work. Bye-bye. Right. I think we can all do that. And again, we're seeing lots of logistics companies be very open about what they're charging. And that's part of their business model. That's their business. We don't need Washington sticking their nose in. Anyway, next, I want to talk to you about freight fraud. Chris, I don't know if you're aware, but there is a freight fraud problem in our business. First, please describe what is freight fraud and what does it look like in the industry?
Yeah. So there's this massive fraud apocalypse, as we like to call it within TIA. And again, TIA has really been talking about fraud for a number of years, dating back to as early as 2011. Kind of when I first joined the organization, even when I was at the lobbying firm, we were talking about it a little bit representing TIA. But at that point in time, we were talking about kind of your traditional double brokering, where a broker would select a trucking company thinking that they would move the freight on their own equipment. And that trucking company would then rebroker or double broker the load out to another trucking company to ultimately make the move. Again, at that point in time in 2011, 2012, when we were pushing for this legislation, which was incorporated, which did become law through MAP 21, the larger reauthorization bill, a lot of this wasn't done for nefarious or criminal reasons. It's just, carriers did it out of convenience. They may not have wanted to incur additional fees or insurance or the bond or surety product they have to obtain to get a brokerage license. So they're probably just doing it out of convenience. Fast forward to the pandemic, and it was even kind of before the pandemic, but certainly during the pandemic, we saw this massive boom. As the supply chain saw a boom, we saw a massive boom of freight fraud. And there's really kind of two buckets that freight fraud, if you will, kind of falls into. One is your traditional kind of cargo theft, where the trailer is relocated or stolen, and obviously that's a stealing of a product, stealing of a trailer. Second is what they call strategic theft, which are these phishing attempts. There's identity theft. Kind of your
that's almost more like a cybersecurity issue.
Cybersecurity, yeah. Also, double brokering to a degree would fall under kind of strategic theft. Gaining access to, let's say, a company's credentials through a phishing attempt, logging into FMCSA, changing emails, changing phone numbers, and from a carrier compliance, carrier selection process, a broker would go in and say, hey, this carrier, their email matches. Their phone number matches. They should be, they're kind of moved forward and checked off the list in terms of greenlit. But little do they know that information has been tampered with and changed, and it's not who they say they are. So this is a massive problem. We do a fraud report on it. We're seeing massive increases in terms of this, and upwards of it's billions of dollars that's impacting the industry.
And we've always had freight fraud, and I think you said it's not necessarily as nefarious, where it's you say, Joe, you can have moved my freight, and I have the authority, and you vetted me, and then I hand it off to a buddy of mine because I'm busy, and I keep $200 for myself, and I make some money, and if the stuff got delivered, you might go, oh, I don't know. I'm busy. I never paid attention to who actually delivered it. But the reality is, had that guy who I gave the freight to, he wasn't vetted by you. He was my buddy, right? So you might find out that later on, that guy's not insured properly. Maybe he's banned from working with your customers in the past. And by the way, that's assuming he even delivers it. If there was an accident, you guarantee there's going to be some issues. So he's not supposed to be moving that freight. And it is against the law. It wasn't a problem until it was actually a problem. But now we have to tighten it up. And I think the industry for a long time, I wouldn't say look the other way, just maybe didn't pay attention close enough. It wasn't as, if you knew somebody was doing that, you wouldn't work with them anymore. But now we're seeing organized gangs stealing not only from trucks, but also from rail. Danielle Spinelli from Descartes was on my podcast a while ago, a couple weeks ago, talking about a webinar she did with the CHIPS, California Highway Patrol. And I think 75% of cargo theft is out there in California, the big vector to attack. But she said that this is not opportunistic. This is organized, sophisticated gangs that are tied sometimes to the drug cartels south of the border. So our little freight fraud problem, the thing that we didn't pay close attention to, blew up on us. Now it's a big problem. And I think every shipper we talk to, any shipper moving high value goods is going to be really well aware. If you're moving pharma or Xboxes or mobile phones, you're probably already really well aware, but I think everybody's now paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're exactly right. It's a very sophisticated criminal network, and they are constantly evolving. They're getting very creative and navigating the system and using technology. Technology can be a friend in this, obviously combating it. There's a lot of great companies out there that are doing really cool things with technology to combat freight fraud, but it's also making the criminal's life, easier as well to kind of infiltrate systems. I remember like 10 years ago, I was at my house, my last house, and this truck was coming through the neighborhood selling furniture off the back of the truck. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, hey, this is a company. It's kind of odd that they're coming through neighborhoods, but it clearly, thinking back on it now, was clearly a stolen load of furniture that these folks were just looking to get back into the market as quick as possible. We met with the Department of Agriculture probably in 2013, and they were like, if you see a lobster truck, you occasionally see those lobster trucks on the side of the road selling live lobsters or honey or whatever the commodity may be. They're like, 99% of that product is all stolen. So you don't think about it at the time. And certainly at that point in time in 2013 or 14, whatever that meeting was, we didn't think about it from that perspective, but certainly now we do.
A friend of mine, he's an attorney, he called and said, hey, because I just saw, I think it was on Facebook Marketplace, they want to sell a pallet of, I don't know, towels or something. He goes, well, how do you buy a pallet of towels? And I was like, you don't. I think. I mean, you can obviously, but I said I wouldn't be surprised if that was stolen. And we have eBay and Facebook Marketplace. I'm not on TikTok, but a ton of people buy on TikTok. There's all sorts of businesses that you can sell that stuff to.
Sure. The other thing we're seeing on Facebook Marketplace is companies looking to buy authorities. We see that quite a bit as carrier selection processes have changed, and people are more hesitant to use maybe a new company coming in the marketplace that has authority. We've seen a few Facebook Marketplace posts, or even one on Amazon, that talks about, hey, we're paying cash for MC numbers, top dollar, must be in good standing with X, Y, and Z, must be within business or must be in business for at least 2 to 3 years. So these companies going out purchasing authorities.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, I saw a video not so long ago. Somebody posted on LinkedIn, 500 authorities at one location, and it's a little office. And we have companies like Descartes, their whole thing is if you vet properly, you're going to be okay. Obviously, Highway is doing a good job on this. Cassandra Gaines is coming on the podcast soon. Carrier Assure. Dale Prax has got that company called Freight. Oh, shoot. I'm drawing a blank on it.
Freight Validate.
Freight Validate, yes. So there are, and I'm sure I'm missing some. So the industry is striking back, and we're going to do a better job. A few years ago, when I was talking to Ann Renke, your predecessor, she said to me before we hit the record button, she goes, Joe, what would you do about freight fraud? And I said, I would talk on the phone to the people that I'm working with. She said, what is that going to do? I said, well, we forever did that. And I said, we added automation, in which we're all thrilled with. And we absolutely know that's the right direction. But that automation means I don't have a personal relationship with Chris Burroughs, who's been moving my freight for the last 6 months. And so I think between the technologies that I just described, and I think just awareness, we're going to get really a much better. But we need some help from the government. What are you guys doing with that? What are you proposing to them?
Yeah, so we've been working on legislation. It actually just passed through markup on the Senate last week, so we're super excited about it. It's called the Household Goods Protection Act. It's not just household goods. It obviously relates to general freight as well. But really, it's taking some of the current FMCSA regulations, like principal place of business. The situation you talked about where there was 400 or 500, it's probably the same one I'm thinking of in Sheridan, Wyoming, where you have to utilize your principal place of business. You can't use a UPS box. You can't use FedEx or a Target or an airport parking lot as your quote unquote place of business. It's already a regulation at FMCSA. It's just not enforced. Secondly, and probably the biggest thing is that there's no enforcement teeth at the FMCSA. As part of the MAP 21 package I talked about earlier, as part of the Fighting Fraud and Transportation Act, which is the piece of legislation we worked on, it created civil penalties for unauthorized brokerage activities or fraud. That, through an administrative law judge ruling in 2019, barred the agency from assessing civil penalties for commercial violations. So this legislation would restore their authority to do that, to give them teeth. We went in and met with FMCSA leadership a few weeks ago. They said how excited they were to have this legislation because they don't have that authority in place to go after some of these folks. Again, none of these are going to be a silver bullet. These are just part of the solution. A lot of the criminal activity, like you mentioned, is based overseas. So what is a commercial civil penalty from the FMCSA going to do to them? Nothing. But some of it is based here in the United States, obviously, as well. And third and final point of our legislation is it requires FMCSA to look at commonality. So if there's 500 companies at the same address, or one individual has 15 different companies, or they use common phone numbers, email addresses, that's something the agency should look into. On the FMCSA front, they're going through a registration modernization now. Hopefully, supposed to be out last month, hasn't been released yet. But they're going to be doing personal background checks on individuals to see who they say they are. They're using a company called IDEMIA, which does all TSA checks at airports. So it's a legitimate company. They'll be doing these background checks. That's going to be the first step. Second step is they're going to be doing business background checks to make sure these companies are domiciled in the states they say they are, that they're legitimate, et cetera. So these are things that are going to help. Again, none of these solutions are, let's implement A and fraud goes away. But if we can deter some of these companies from getting authority to begin with, and the agency kind of crack down on the entry to barrier, or the barrier of entry to come into the marketplace, that will certainly help on the back end.
Yeah, and that's such a fine line. I don't want anybody coming into the industry saying I can't get an authority or I can't. But
absolutely, yeah.
So we don't want to do that because the owner operators are so important to the space, and obviously none of them want to spend a small fortune becoming an owner operator. We already have enough problem keeping those guys successful. Yeah, I think awareness is such a big part of this. Chris, we have identification now with using video, I can identify whether the truck driver who's supposed to drop off my stuff is dropping off my stuff. So I think we're going to get better and better. But I think just this awareness, once you have this awareness that there is a real problem, I think you're going to see people starting to dot the I's and cross the T's, because some of this became possible because it was kind of an easy vector, right? And we're an industry that works with people we don't ever meet in many cases. So I'm a freight broker in Idaho, and I'm having a trucking company I don't know pick up in Winnipeg and deliver to California. And I don't ever meet those guys. I never even meet the shipper. And that's kind of it's amazing it works as well as it does.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm talking to my friend Chris Burroughs, and we're talking about TIA Unpacks Freight, Tariffs, trust, and the fight against fraud. So we've talked about the state of the industry. We talked about the trust and transparency stuff you guys working with, kind of making sure the government doesn't overstep and hurt us. Then we just talked about freight fraud. Next, I want to talk to you about the role of TIA in all of this. Why should somebody get involved with TIA?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like I said at the beginning, it's the value in TIA is advocacy, education, industry knowledge, and amazing networking opportunities. Really kind of the tip of the spear of every trade organization is advocacy. What we're doing in Washington D.C., being that voice up on Capitol Hill. As you said at the beginning, everyone can reach out to their member of Congress, and we fully welcome that. Everyone should build a relationship with their members of Congress. They absolutely should. But you all are running your logistics, you're running your brokerage on a day-to-day operation. You can't be in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill Tuesday through Thursday. That's most of the days Congress are here. Monday's a fly-in day, Friday's a fly-home day. They don't put in 5-day work weeks like we do. But we're there. We're there on Capitol Hill on a weekly basis, up there advocating on behalf of our members, on behalf of our industry, and being that voice with lawmakers and with, like I said at the beginning, with federal agencies and the administration. We have a number of excellent educational and certification within TIA as part of the membership to grow your knowledge base, to increase your awareness of the latest issues and trends within the industry. We're 1,900 members strong. A lot of our freight brokers, we have a lot of associate members as well, like you mentioned, tech companies that are part of the TIA tent. We would welcome anybody else that would like to participate and be part of the solution to addressing a lot of these problems.
Yep. So it's interesting. There's 25,000 freight brokers, and obviously you're also taking warehousing companies and technology companies and freight forwarders. They're not all necessarily involved. And I think I said this before we hit the record button. I said, I know TIA members tend to do better in every market. And I said, is that because they skew to bigger companies that can afford to be part of TIA? And you said, no. Please elaborate on that.
Yeah. I mean, we certainly, within TIA, we certainly have, I think on Transport Topics top 100 list, I think we have 94 or 95 of the top companies. But the majority of our members, our regular members, the folks that are in the business, that are brokerages, overwhelmingly 70% of those are small business, and typically 5 million or less in annual revenue. So there's a lot of offerings within TI for small companies. There's a ton of offerings for large companies as well. We segment that out based on the size of the industry and the value that each company needs. But there's Joe, it's a good point, because a lot of people think of TIA and they think of like, oh, it's all the big boys.
That's the muckety mucks are going there. I can't go.
Yeah, it couldn't be further from the truth. Like the industry, we are very fragmented, and majority of those companies are small.
Yep. I interviewed, I forgot the guy's name now, but he was head of your technology, I don't know, division, but committee. And I thought that was very interesting that you guys had a technology committee. It's probably not a committee, but whatever you guys call that.
It's a committee. Yeah.
Is it a committee?
Right.
But it's just, it interests me because we have a new technology that becomes the killer app every 6 months now. And I think this is the way you keep up is you get to a TIA event, and they're always in nice places and they're always fun. And you get to that event and see what's new, see what everyone else is doing, see what all the cool kids are doing. And I think this is a competitive business, obviously. If you decide, oh, I don't need to get there, you don't want to be the last one to end up with the visibility tools or with pricing algorithms. So there's a reason you get to TIA, and it's to stay relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great, I'll give a shameless plug here for our Technovations, which is our tech conference that we hold.
That's it. I've been to Technovations. I went to San Diego. That was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's coming up in the fall, in early November, November 5th through 7th. So we're excited about that. It's going to be out in Phoenix. So obviously, anytime you go to Phoenix is a good time. November is especially a good time to go out to Phoenix. But really, our technology committee drives that entire agenda. to really highlight the latest technology trends and products that are out there. You're exactly right. And I think a few years ago, people called technology kind of the equalizer in the space, the logistics space. I personally look at it as the lifeblood. If you're not adapting the latest technology and being the technology leader that your shipper customers are looking for, or just being a player in that space, I mean, you're going to get left behind. So technology is the key. As we always said in Capitol Hill, people were like, "Oh, so you're a trucking company? Those are your assets." Like, no, we don't. Most of our guys, yes, some members have trucks through a different company. I said our assets are our people and our technology.
Yes, and by the way, a larger percentage of freight is going to freight brokers now. I was on my podcast many years ago, and I thought as technology becomes more and more important, we won't need the brokers in the middle. And what we found out is the brokers are the ones who made the investment in technology, in customer success, in sales, obviously, and they've become much more sophisticated. I think a lot of times shippers in the past would look at freight brokers as just a middleman, just a middleman. Is not adding any value. Now there's a tremendous amount of value being added in between with analytics, with customer success, technology that gives you insights and the speed that is so critical these days. By the way, let me bring up AI for just a second. I know we didn't talk about it, but it's popping out everywhere. This weekend, this Memorial Day weekend, I saw videos on Instagram that were all AI. One was, I guess, an AI video about protests in Hollywood about AI not taking our jobs. And it was all AI actors. And I also heard Jamie Dimon say, "Oh, I've really pushed my employees and my managers not to hire more heads to utilize AI." So how are we going to use AI? Everybody talks about it. I think this is why you got to get to TIA, because you get to the Technovations conference and find out that, hey, your competition is already using an AI that helps them have 2 or 3 fewer employee on a function. Really worth knowing.
Yeah, we do kind of to take off of Shark Tank, but we do a Shark Tank session at our Technovations. And last year, it's 4 or 5 startup companies coming into the space, and they kind of give their pitch, and we have a panel that asks questions. And it's a really cool event.
Yeah, Ben Gordon was up there last time I was there. It was 2 years ago, and these are real investors. So
yeah, and last year, literally a gentleman, and I won't name the company, not to play favorites, but a gentleman went up there. It was from one of the AI companies, and he literally booked a load, negotiated pricing, and did everything through AI right on stage with his iPhone. So it's certainly there's a lot of really cool stuff that's in the marketplace, and we welcome everybody to be involved and get active with it.
Excellent. So I'm going to summarize the best I can, Chris Burroughs, and I want to get your final thoughts. And by the way, I will make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, and any other links you and your go-to-market team give me, I'll put in the show notes. So again, I'm talking to Chris Burroughs from TIA. We talked about the state of freight post-COVID. There was a slump. We've all experienced it. There's been margin compression. The tariffs just brought more uncertainty that we did not need. So it's not horrible, but we're all done waiting for that surge. Who knows what it's going to take, whether it's going to be more trucking companies leaving the market or a surge in the economy. Something's got to come in and boost this market a tad. Next, we talked about transparency. So the government is kind of pushing a rule with transparency, and you guys are straightening them out a little bit. And again, I think most of us are saying, yeah, we can have transparency if we want it. As a carrier, you can demand to know exactly what everybody who's giving you business, what they're paying or what they're being paid. And don't work with people who don't give it to you. But I think we don't need the government mandating that. Next, we talked about freight fraud, and you guys are going to bat for us in Washington, D.C. on this one also. And again, I think this is the government's not going to have this total solution, but nor is any one technology. We need as an industry some upgrades. And I think it starts with you guys pulling together all the information, helping the government understand our needs. Last but not least, we just talked about the role of TIA and why you should join and why you should get to their conferences. I highly recommend them. Anyway, enough of my blather. Put a big old bow on this one, Chris Burroughs. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I'll kind of leave with three kind of quick final thoughts. Is one, we highly recommend, if it's through TIA or through another trade organization, get involved. Get involved with your with what TI is doing and what other organizations are doing on Capitol Hill. Advocacy is important. Building that relationship is massively important. We couldn't highly recommend this enough. Two, obviously stay ahead in the latest trends of technology. Our conference is the Technovation Conference is just one place that you can learn what the latest technology trends are, just to continue to be viable in the marketplace with the technology trends. And three is, be kind to your trucking companies that you're working with. I think oftentimes folks kind of look at, their shippers or our customers, and trucks are over here. Both shippers and motor carriers are our customers. We need to continue to look at both organizations and both entities as the same, and just let's build positive relationships with our carriers, just as we will with our customers. So those are kind of my three closing notes.
When is Technovations? That's your next conference? When is that?
Yeah, that's in November 5th through 7th in Phoenix.
So if you send me a link to that, I will put that in the show notes so people can get that on their calendar.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Chris Burroughs. It was a pleasure talking to you. I love what you guys are doing. You got our back.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast.
Yep. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.